breaking news for your home. Wayday! Wayfair's big sale is almost here, and you can score the best deals in home. Like up to 80% off everything home. Yes, you heard that right. 80% off with free shipping on everything. Plus surprise flash deals all Wayday long. We're talking outdoor furniture and essentials, rugs, and more. All at Wayfair, and all up to 80% off during Wayday. Shop Wayfair's Wayday from April 25th through 27th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Hey there, island dreamers, locals, and anyone craving a slice of paradise. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to the Fun in Key West podcast, where the vibe is always laid back, the stories are salty, and the drinks, well, they're definitely frozen. I'm your host, Michelle O'Connor, your unofficial tour guide to the Concord public. Whether you're planning your first trip, your fifth trip, or you're just daydreaming about trading the cubicle for the ocean breeze, you are in the right place. Here's the deal. This podcast is your insider's guide to all things Key West. We're talking where to eat, hello, conch fritters and key lime pie. Where to drink, spoiler alert, there will be rum. Where to stay, and all the quirky, wonderful things that make Key West the one-of-a-kind paradise we all love. Plus, we'll keep you up to date on the latest happenings, festivals, events, maybe even the occasional Hemingway lookalike sighting. And just to keep things spicy, we'll be bringing on some amazing guests now and then, locals, business owners, and people who know the island like the back of their sandy hand. So grab your flip-flops, pour yourself a cold one, and let's escape to the island state of mind together, whether you're tuning in from your hammock or your commute, while wishing it was a hammock. We've got all the Key West goodness coming your way. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun in Key West. Let's dive in. Let's be honest, we've all fantasized about ditching reality and escaping to a tropical island. But imagine landing in Key West during the 1970s. Today, we are grabbing a virtual bar stool with William McKeen, author of the incredible book, Mile Marker Zero. We are diving headfirst into the sun-soaked, reckless history of the writers, musicians, and true characters who turn the island into their personal muse. William is an absolute master storyteller, and trust me, the behind-the-scenes anecdotes he shares today are as refreshing as a cold beer on a 95-degree August afternoon. Grab your favorite drink, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and let's get into the madness.
Welcome to Fun in Key West, where every day feels like a mini fest. Grab a drink, take it slow. We'll show you where the locals go. Food, fun, and stories to tell. Hidden gems you know so well. Your Key West experts here to say it's fun in Key West every day.
Welcome to the Fun in Key West podcast. I am Michelle, and I am so glad that you are joining us today. Today is going to be a lot of fun, especially if you are in our Fun in Key West book club, because I am so excited. We have William McKeen, or Bill, and he is the author of Mile Marker Zero. And I'm telling you, it's a book that you all need to dive into and really get your hands wrapped around, because it takes us back to the 1970s in Key West, and it's an interesting time to say the least. But it takes us back into a time of Key West, drops us right there where it was creative, it was chaotic, it was funny, and a little reckless, I'm going to say, and completely unforgettable. Bill is a longtime journalism professor at Boston University, and as of spring 2026, he's back serving as acting chair there as well. He's written some truly legendary people and moments. And today we're not just talking about Mile Marker Zero itself, but how this story came together, what surprised him while writing it, and what this era of Key West still has to say to us now. So, William, thank you so much for joining me. Did I miss it? I spent some time going on your website, and there was so much. So I'm sure there's something I absolutely missed on that introduction.
Oh, you did a great job. I'm just still grooving on that music. That was a great theme song you have there.
I like my theme song.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the story, can you tell me what? Because I think people are going to want to know what still pulls you toward a story after all these years of teaching and writing and reporting. Because, like I said, I spent a lot of time on your website, and you just get attached to these stories. What still drives you to do that?
Oh, I don't know. It just seems like as long as I've been cognizant, probably since 14 or 15, I've been telling stories for audiences. I started working for newspapers when I was 14 and then went on to work for a couple of magazines. And I'm addicted to storytelling. And that's always been more important to me in the journalism than the reporting. I don't know that I would put my reporting skills up there with some of my great colleagues, but I do love the storytelling and the challenge of it. And I like to keep doing it. I mean, that's kind of the way I teach too. I teach as a series of stories, not just learn this fact, but know this story. It's a great story. And so mile marker zero was probably one of the most pleasant things I've ever done because um, I enjoyed the stories I had to tell. I enjoyed meeting the people whose stories I then related. I mean, a lot of the characters in this book are people that I admired for decades, writers, artists, actors, and so forth. And to get to tell their stories was a great pleasure.
Mhm.
And it was something I would say the idea of the book was not original with me, but once I had the permission of the person whose idea it was, I felt that I could just dive in, and I had a terrific time from start to finish working on this. The odd thing is, a lot of obviously, I would come to Key West to do some research and reporting, but so many of the characters ended up in Montana that I
Mhm.
ended up spending probably more time in Montana doing my interviews than I did in Key West.
So you alluded to this was somebody else's ideas and to write the story. Can you give me a little bit more into that of whose story idea this really was?
Well, yeah, I was working on an earlier book, a biography of Hunter S. Thompson, and that sort of brought me into the orbit of a guy named Tom Corcoran. And I know you've dealt with at least one of his books in your book club, The Mango Opera. And Tom and I got together, and he was just enormously helpful uh, in helping me tell the story of Hunter Thompson. And there was some urgency about getting that book done because Hunter had killed himself in 2005, and there was kind of a somebody wanted anyone who wanted the definitive biography of Hunter S. Thompson, had many to choose from. There were people making documentary films. The editor of Rolling Stone was putting out a book. There were memoirs by his friends. So I got mine done. And as part of my research, Tom Corcoran played for me the last message he ever got from Hunter S. Thompson. And I used it as on the opening of my book. Let me see what it says here. It says, Tom, I'm going to do a Hunter S. Thompson
I
impersonation.
appreciate that.
Tom, Tom, we had an active night tonight. I spent a lot of time talking with Buffett down at Nicholson's house, and we both got very excited about the Key West years, the missing years, the ones you have so well documented. We're going to reconvene down there and go back over the stories, the photographs, maybe do a little boating. Let's have the boys back, Chatham, McQueen, whoever's alive. It's going to be good, and we're going to have a little fun with this one. So that was the phone message that Hunter left on Tom Corcoran's answering machine. And it was about 6 weeks before he killed himself. And of course, he's talking about Jack Nicholson, Jimmy Buffett, and so on. Um, Tom never returned that message, and when Hunter killed himself, and then we got to know each other, he shared that with me. And then, as I was finishing the biography of Hunter Thompson, Tom said, "Why don't you write that book that Hunter wanted us to do?" And I said, "Well, it'd be fine, but I wasn't here in the 1970s." And you were. And he said, "I can't write this. I'm too close to it. I want you to do it." And I thought, that's all I need. That's like a papal blessing. Corcoran says he'll do everything he can to help me. And he did set up a few interviews, and he told me a lot of stuff. Even told me some things I think he came to regret later. But when I offered to take them out of the book, he said, "No, no, it's your book. You do what you want. I told you. I knew I was talking to a writer. No big deal." So I went ahead and did it. It's not quite the same way that Tom Corcoran would have done it, obviously. I saw him as a really compelling character because he came there from the Midwest, and he'd been in the Navy, and had sort of this comfortable life that was heading a certain direction. And then he got to Key West and he went off the rails. And that's kind of the story of what happened to a lot of people in Key West. So he made a great narrator as somebody who could go through all aspects of the book, even when their chapters focused more on, filmmakers or actors or writers or whatever. So once he said, "No, I want you to do this," then I was all in.
And all in, I will say, because the book just starts off with an amazing stories that transport us back to a time that a lot of us aren't familiar with Key West. Did you feel different when you started out with the concept of what you were going to do by the time you ended the book? Did you think, oh, it's going to go this direction, and by the time you got done, the book had taken a different turn?
Uh, well, it goes back to the earlier book on Hunter Thompson because I believe Hunter Thompson had a lot of gifts as a storyteller and was a brilliant guy, totally self-educated. And yet, when you read references to Hunter Thompson in pop culture and other books, it was always about, his alcohol and drug consumption.
Hmm.
And all of that drew away from his achievement. So I knew I wanted to keep mile markers here going in the same direction. I knew this could easily turn into a collection of stories of people throwing up in the gutter after a hard night of drinking, and I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be about this somewhat idyllic society. Uh, at some point in the book, Thomas McQueen says that it was kind of a new frontier, and people were experimenting with all kinds of different aspects of their art. So I wanted to keep it focused on the serious nature of that work. I mean, we have not just great writers like Thomas McGuane and Jim Harrison, but a great painter, Russell Chatham, actors like Peter Fonda and uh, Margot Kidder, and some of the other characters there. And then there's a through line that's also about the music and how Jimmy Buffett was sort of at the kind of a low point when he came to Key West for the first time, and that's when he found his muse. So although I don't consider Buffett part of the group that's the focus of the story, he's certainly an important character. And the first day he got to Key West, it was Tom Corcoran who served him his first beer. And when Buffett had no place to stay, it was Tom Corcoran who said, "Well, if you don't mind my kid being around, come sack out on my couch for a few weeks if you need it." So, there are these connections between, all of these all of these characters, and it was fun to kind of relive all of that. Even though I wasn't there to live it the first time, I guess I shouldn't say relive it. It was great to see that story told through their eyes.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people I've talked to who have read the book is it puts us back in that time. And I think that's what makes the book so interesting is it does transport us back to a different Key West than what we see today. But your book almost makes Key West a character unto itself in the book. So what was it about Key West in the 1970s that makes it such a magnet for those artists, those writers, those painters, and the people that were trying to reinvent themselves?
I think it was just sort of, an outlier. It wasn't really part of Florida. It was its own republic as it was briefly, um, and it was a place where, you know, a creative person, maybe somebody of some celebrity, could go and not be hassled, and they could do their work, they could hang out, they could relax, they could be themselves, and the culture in Key West was not to bug someone like that. If you're, you know, famous actor or a celebrity of some kind. Whereas in the reverse, the person that was the real celebrity was probably Dink Bruce, whose you know, family went back a couple of generations, I guess, in Key West. And Dink was kind of a fishing guide and a bunch of other things, and he was the celebrity, not you know, Hunter Thompson or whomever the equivalent actor would be today to George Clooney, someone like that. People like that could go to Key West and kind of fly under the radar, and and I think they like that. I think they found it inspiring, and plus, it's just such a beautiful place.
Mhm.
Um, I did have a quote from Jim Harrison, who may not be as well known today as a lot of other writers, but when I say he's the author of Legends of the Fall, people are, you know, suddenly are aware of who he was. He said he used to love to go to Key West back in the days when the gutter stank of fish guts, I think is what he says. So Key West has become a lot more genteel in the last 20 or 30 years, however long it was. But back then it was the definition of funky, and it was also a lot cheaper. But you know, to me, then as now, it doesn't matter when. There's nothing like sitting in an open air restaurant eating some fish that was caught over there
Mhm.
just about an hour and a half before, and you know, having a nice tall frosty to go with that. It's, you know, it is a paradise. It's
It
an expensive paradise now, but it's still a paradise.
So before it became what it is today, and I think what people need to, and maybe you did a really good job of doing this in the book, it wasn't a place that was out of reach to live in. It you
Mhm.
could manage to live there, um, and it wasn't as expensive as it was, which I think afforded the opportunity to these creative people to say, you know what, I can go make a living being a writer and live in paradise.
Right. And I'm not quite sure when that happened or what the comparative rates were for rents or mortgages or whatever. But I, you know, so many of the people that work in the service industry in Key West now are driving in from Sugarloaf and perhaps you know, Big Pine
Mhm.
further up the Keys because living in Key West is just so expensive. It's a beautiful place, but it's out of reach of a lot of people. And you know, I get approached by people now and then to, you know, I'd like to make a trip to Key West. What should I do? And I reel off the usual things to people, but you know, when they get back to me when they find out how much the trip would cost,
Mhm.
and they've canceled by then, which is unfortunate because I first went there as a little kid, and you know, it in so many ways, my visions of it as an 8-year-old, are still intact. Uh, the beauty of the place was just overwhelming. And now it seems like it's a beauty only if you have a certain amount of money.
Mhm.
Um, Now, luckily for several years, I was married to a woman who'd grown up in Key West, and her family's there, and they're all, they sort of dominate a certain part of the island. And so I never had to worry about those expenses because I always had a place to stay. And it was within walking distance of this, coffee stand where you could get cafe con leche. We didn't have to worry about parking because, everything's bike or walking distance.
Mhm.
Didn't have to book a motel. And I realize now that I'm divorced, what a wonderful experience that was and how rare to go visit Key West without having to leave after 3 days because you've just spent $400, $500 a night on a hotel room.
Yep.
Um, so it gets, it's unfortunate it's not that way anymore. There's probably no going back though.
Right.
It will remain kind of uh, a retreat for very wealthy people.
Mhm. There are moments and there are times during the year when it's you can catch a good deal, and so I always try to point that out to people that if you're as long as you're not trying to be there during snowbird season or Fantasy Fest, and you don't mind Florida summers, there's some opportunities hidden here and there. It's not as cheap as it used to be, but there are some bargain
Well,
time.
I lived in Florida for most of my life, and much of that was in Gainesville, Florida, when I was at the University of Florida for, I guess, about 25 years. And if you ever want to know what hell is like, go to Gainesville in August because the temperature is high and the humidity is horrifying.
Yes.
So go to Key West in the summer, and it's a lot different because you got a breeze
Hmm.
and heat is a lot more endurable. In fact, I never think of when I think of Key West, I never think about being uncomfortably hot there. It's always been kind of the Goldilocks of American towns. It's just right.
Yeah. We've got a place in Orlando, and that can be miserable in the summertime. But you're walking in Key West in August, and most people have, most restaurants and bars and stores have their doors open and their air conditioning,
Right.
spills out onto the sidewalk. So,
Yeah, very
so
comfortable.
it's very comfortable. You have mentioned all these characters and all these stories, and it could be a jumbled mess if you start to think about it. But when you take this big cast of characters and that are wild and colorful and have all this amazing story and life to tell about, how did you craft it and what did you think about when you were putting it together to make sure it seemed like an intimate conversation and not just a hierarchy of facts and history of somebody?
Well, that's where using Tom Corcoran as a central character came in handy because he was the point that everyone would relate to because he's from the Midwest, from Ohio, had this colorful but somewhat conventional background that a lot of people could relate to, and he goes to he's a military officer. He's in the Navy. He goes to Key West, and before you know it, he's selling tacos from a bicycle. That's kind of the quintessential experience there. But what he did was he was a great gateway to all of the other characters. And so, uh, it's almost like watching one of those Olympic relay races where you're watching somebody hand the baton to someone else. So it starts with Tom Corcoran. He hands a baton to another character, hands a baton to another character, and then it comes back. And so in terms of narrative, the story's kind of a round robin because we establish this cast, we introduce new people now and then. I always tell people I've written 2.5 books about Hunter S. Thompson because he shows up in this book, but not until the last third, really. Um, but there's a connection between all of them. Now, it's not the definitive story of Key West. I'm sure there are a lot of people that would make for great stories full of anecdotes and all of that. But I wanted to kind of concentrate on a group that sometimes is known as the Sporting Club,
Mhm.
and that's Thomas McGuane, Jim Harrison, Russell Chatham, um, a French count named Guy de la Valdine, and then the periphery of that would be Corcoran and Buffett, and then some of the actors involved in a movie that McGuane was making in Key West during that time called 110, wait a minute, 92 in the Shade.
Mhm.
And so the idea of circulating these stories was, it didn't require a real strict chronology. I mean, I consciously did not, or I did not consciously alternate any chronology. It's just that I kind of dispense with the idea of worrying about this date and that date and kind of letting the story flow through the characters. And they were themselves great storytellers. And um, when I interviewed the big three, who are artists I've really admired all my life, McGuane, Harrison, and Chatham, I just had to let my recorder roll because they were telling great stories. In fact, McGuane and Harrison are so well known as master writers and so on. But to me, it was Russell Chatham who was the greatest storyteller and extremely bawdy. We might want to mention here, there should be probably a warning label on the book that there's some stuff in there that's a little raunchy, and we we in fact ended up cutting some of the raunchiness, but I preserved it on my website as kind of a, what do I call it, a bonus track where I have a few scenes with Russell Chatham, who was apparently oh, I don't know, sex crazed. I don't know if that's the right term. Unfortunately, Russell is no longer with us, so I don't think he could ever sue us for that because I could plead truth as a defense. But anyway, just getting their stories and they provided such colorful details. It was so much fun to talk to these guys.
Mhm.
And also, I should point out that um, one of the thrills of my life was making Margot Kidder laugh. I said something that I probably shouldn't say here, and she had this deep, rumbling, smoky voice,
Mhm.
whiskey woman kind of laugh. And I thought, yes, life is complete. I have made my teenage crush laugh. And unfortunately, she's no longer with us either.
Nope. Nope. So I was going to ask about what did you cut, but you alluded that you did cut some things, but they are not lost. You can find them over on your website as a bonus.
Right.
And that's I'm telling you what, if you have not been to William's website, please go. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes, but you will get lost down so many rabbit holes, and I find it so endearing, and the stories just take us there. As you were
Thank
starting to pull all these together, and you're listening to the stories come out, did any of them kind of make you stop and go, did that really happen? And now what? Tell me that again. Were any of those stories just so over the top that you were like, hmm?
Not the stories from the people I interviewed, but there are elements of history to the book. I talk a little bit about the supposed first civilizations on the island and all of that. And so one thing I included, but not in tremendous detail, was about the physician who kept his young dead bride stuffed in his house. There's that, and then of course the Bumfarto stories. I don't think I could have. I wasn't that into telling that story. I think it's amusing, but it just didn't seem to fit with mine. But I thought I can't do a book about Key West and not of that era and not have him in it, and it does show a lot about the prevalence of drugs in that era. Um, but yeah, this is why I love editors. My editor on a earlier book that I'd done would her advice to me, because it was a memoir, she said, "Send me everything." And so I did. And when I got the manuscript back, she would just write on top of a certain page, "No," or "You're whining." And so I cut it down quite a bit with her guidance like that. And I said, I had a dedication of her in the book, and I said, I sent her a steamer trunk, and she sent me back a valise. And editors are so important. And so when it came to, when you hear all these great sexual adventures from these characters, you're inclined to include them all
Mhm.
just because they're so wild. And my editor, different publisher, different editor on this book said, over some of these comments, "I think we've made our point." And I love it when editors, are so blunt but so simple like that. She doesn't have to say, cross out this, move this around. It's just, we've made our point. And so I took out some of the hypersexualized stuff because, again, going back to the painter, Russell Chatham, spent an afternoon with him, and you will hear about, 47 violations of the laws of sexual nature. I mean, he was sort of an animal, and a lot of this stuff would happen in public. There's a scene that I think I used in the book where he has sex with a young woman on a bar, in a bar in Key West, with a crowd cheering him on. And he says, as a master of understatement, this is not the sort of thing that happens every day. But it was happening in Key West. Um, he was so good as a storyteller.
Mhm.
So I think you asked a question, and I think I didn't answer it, or did I?
No, you answered it. You did well.
Okay,
You did well.
all right.
Which brings in a point of I had a book club member reach out and they weren't able to join us live, but they said that that Bum Farto and the Pink Bingo story was one of their favorites in the book. So that lets you know that made sense to them being in the book, and it did bring back that era and put it into context for the readers, I think.
I felt my only concern about that was that it didn't connect to our main characters as much, but it needed to be there. And I think that anybody who does any reading about Key West in that period, you're always going to hear those stories.
Mhm.
And I think it also showed how, maybe the different sort of enforcement that public officials were using against those substances in that place and time versus anywhere else in the country.
Okay.
So it was an important element of the book. The part with the doctor, to be honest with you, I can't remember if I included that or not. I meant to review the book. It's been out like 15 years now, so I often have to prod my memory. But my main character, or continuing character, Tom Corcoran, had a small publishing operation that he ran out of his house, and it was a book publishing operation, and it produced his book on Jimmy Buffett's Key West years, which is
Mhm.
mostly a book of really fun photographs, and some of his novels, his later novels. But also, he would reprint uh, old books about Key West. One about the Flagler Railroad, one about the wreckers off the Florida Keys, and also the one by Ben Harrison, I believe, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but the story of the doctor who kept his wife's corpse in his house.
Yeah.
Good stories. And
Great
so
stories.
I, I don't know what's happened to Tom's works, if Key West Books still has some of those historical works that he produced as a publisher, not as a writer. But he was trying to keep Key West literature alive and did a good job.
It is such a unique niche, and it's so diverse. You have books like yours, you have books like Tom's, you have, books that span the whole gamut of nonfiction to fiction. And our book club has really enjoyed being able to, we pop in and out of different genres, and we go to light mysteries to nonfiction, and it's such a unique niche. And people who have never been to Key West but want to go can experience it through the book, or those that have been and just can't make it back get to relive, oh, I remember going down that street and all of that. So I think that's important to do, and that's why we started the book club.
Well, good. I really enjoy reading Tom Corcoran's books because he's a very evocative writer. He engages all of your senses.
Hmm.
And one of the things my wife clued me in on when I was married to her still when I was writing this book was she said, if you think about Key West, you think about smells, and there are different smells for different kinds of years. And I thought that was I'm so glad she pointed that out to me because then on my next trip I was going around like that. But Tom's books bring that back, and also when his main character Alex Rutledge walks through a place, you feel like you're back there. I'm back in the half shell raw bar. I'm watching the guy shucking while I'm on my cell phone and drinking a beer, and
Hmm.
he's he was a very evocative writer, and I don't just miss him as a friend. I miss him as a it's about time for another one of those novels of his, but we won't be getting any, I guess.
Yeah, there. You are so correct about the smells. I've been doing some questions a day for the last couple of weeks on our Facebook page. And one of the things that's been a common thing of, how do you know you're in, what's your, I know I'm in Key West moment. And a lot of people are, when I used to be able to walk off the plane across the tarmac and get that first smell. And so smells really connect people to Key West. You can't walk off the airplane to cross the tarmac anymore. So you
Well, as a
wait until
teacher,
you,
I
yeah.
I tell my students, engage all the senses.
Hmm.
Talk about what you're hearing, what you're smelling, what you're tasting, and that will you don't have to go overboard with it, but the suggestion of it ought to be helpful. Like, is it Frangipani that's in Key West that just has this beautiful floral, but not overwhelmingly floral aroma to it. Um, I mean, I don't care about the fish gut stuff that that Jim Harrison seemed to miss, but I understand the Minger. And my ex-wife also used to say she liked to listen to smell uh, the outboard motor gasoline smell. And even though that's nothing she would go for, that was a trigger
Hmm.
about being home, going back to Key West. She lived away for a couple of years, but, spent almost all of her life there. So whenever she returns as an adult, certain things like that trigger those emotions.
Oh yeah, yeah, they really do. And I think what's interesting about your book is it's, I think, more than just stories. I think it's a story about friendship and those memories and survival. And do you think the book is really about friendship?
Oh, I do. In fact, I don't know how it's classified. What does it say on the back of the book? Biography. Yeah, it is, but it's not a biography of an individual. It's a biography of a friendship. These people who've known each other for 40 years, and this is mostly about this intense period of their lives. But, when the book came out, they were all still with us, and the friendships had endured. And, they'd been tested a lot because um, Tom McGuane, in particular, had. had come to grips with his substance abuse issues. And to me, it was a book with a happy ending because he got clean and sober. He went from being a guy who had 3 wives within the space of 18 months to being married to one woman at that time, 35 years. Now it's closing on 50. Um, I mean, that was a happy ending. And the previous book about Hunter Thompson, obviously ended with his suicide. And some of my friends told me, and it nothing makes me happier than when somebody says, "I read your book and it made me cry." Yeah, that's what you want. You want some kind of emotion. So I thought I was heading toward a happy ending with Mile Marker Zero because I thought, wow, the most notorious drug and alcoholic abuser of his generation goes clean, and there's a happy ending, and he described his marriage as jubilant, and I thought, how many people would ever say that
Mhm.
unless they were truly in a jubilant marriage? And I saw them both on the ranch in Montana, and these people are happy. So I thought I had a happy ending, and then I pressed a little further on Tom Corcoran about what had happened to his wife. She had disappeared, and they never found her body. And I thought, oh shit, there goes the happy ending.
Mhm.
Um, it didn't happen, and that's the part that Tom said, "Oh, I didn't know you were going to use that in the book." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll take it out." And he said, "No, keep it in." And it does offer kind of uh, a very, to me, very tragic denouement to the story.
Mhm.
Uh, that not everybody escapes paradise.
No. Nope. What is though? You've been quoted as saying that Mile Marker Zero was your redemption story, but and you've alluded to you want people to have an emotion when they read one of your books. What do you want people to take away from Mile Marker Zero?
Uh, well, that's a good question. Beyond it just being a good story, I mean, I guess you could see it somewhat as a cautionary tale. Here are some artists who were flying a little too close to the sun, and luckily they survived. They got away with it. It didn't happen for everybody, uh, and I think that they found this inspiration and camaraderie in Key West, but I don't think they could have stayed there for many more years without without succumbing to the pleasures. Let's say. I mean, there are times I thought, and this is kind of funny considering what a lightweight I am. By the time I'm halfway through my second beer, I'm kind of too tired to do anything else.
Hmm.
Um, and so a couple of times when I was married, and my wife is from Key West, they said something like, "Should I look for a job there? Do you think we should?" And she said, "You'd never last because the so much of the town, it seems to be built around just pleasure, and so when they offer you your first margarita at 11 a.m.,
Hmm.
it's going to be harder to say no to the next one at 11:30, and so on. And for somebody who's actually trying to work there or create art or whatever, that's going to take you away from your core mission.
Hmm.
And I don't think someone like Thomas McGuane, who is not as widely known today as he was in the 70s, which is unfortunate,
Hmm.
but he has been a prolific writer for all these years since he moved away from Key West or stopped going there so frequently. He's written mostly about Montana. Fantastic storyteller, prolific storyteller, and I don't know that he would have been able to do that in Key West. And perhaps the same thing with Jim Harrison.
Hmm.
Jim Harrison never seemed to feel the need to go cold turkey from alcohol or anything like that. And he would almost routinely publish a book a year. But again, that was after he moved back to, in his case, his home's in Arizona and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then he later moved to Montana too. So the sporting club, uh, meeting the cast of characters who was in Key West in the 70s, they all relocated to Montana, uh, mostly around Livingston, Montana, and of course Jimmy Buffett was there as well. So um, yeah, I think that that was most important part of the creative lives in terms of inspiration, maybe. But I don't think they could have stayed 1 minute longer than they did. And
Yeah.
by stayed, they weren't living there full time, but they would spend maybe a half a year there and a half a year up north.
Yeah. So I'm going to give an opportunity if anybody's watching that they have a question, put it in the chat, and we will do that before. So I just have a couple of things before we wrap up. And you've kind of alluded to this in your last answer. Do you think that a creative environment could still exist in Key West like it did in the 70s? Or do you think that was a one moment in time and it's probably not going to be replicated again?
I don't think I'd say the second option there
Mm.
because that'd be kind of arrogant to say, well, they did it and no one else can ever do it again, because I think anything's possible, and I do think that the expense issue is considerable, but that I don't think that necessarily affects anyone's creativity. I think the important thing is probably the ability to exist and be creative in that environment and not succumb to the many, many, many temptations.
Hmm.
So I believe, and I'm sure there is a creative environment there. I remember one of my trips back, I went with Tom to a writing class he was teaching, just sort of for not people taking courses, but just people who wanted to learn more about writing. And it was a big discussion, a bunch of people, and they were doing all kinds of creative things. So, yeah, I think that could happen again. I'd like to see Key West get more of its due in terms of its contributions to American creativity. I mean, not just Hemingway, but also Tennessee Williams, James Leo Hurley. There were a bunch of people
Hmm.
working there in Key West who've done great things, and maybe and Judy Blume, Stuart Woods. Maybe they weren't writing about Key West specifically, but it was it had to serve some kind of role as a muse, I think, for all of them. So yeah, I believe such a creative environment not only could exist, probably does exist. We just might not be as fully aware of it yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I always ask people who spend time in Key West some closing questions. Where's your go-to place for coffee when you're in Key West?
There was a stand. I think it's been years since I've been there, and my mind is failing. But there's a place on Flagler, is it called the Habana Plaza, and right at the corner there's a little coffee stand. No English is spoken, but my in-laws sent me up there to get the coffee order one time, and you don't need English. You just say, three of these, two of these. Um, and to me, that was great. That cafe con leche was the best I've ever had. I tried other coffee places, but you come back to brand loyalty, the place where
Mm.
you started.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I like that joint a lot.
Other than, family, when you were visiting more often, was there a place that you absolutely went and loved for dinner?
Oh yeah, um, Elsie Bonet.
Mhm.
I liked. I liked. I'm very low rent, so I like again like a place like Turtle Crawls or the Half Shell. You know, open air,
Mhm.
breeze blowing through, fish sandwich. I mean, I don't even need a regular wall. B.O.'s Fish Wagon to
Mhm.
me was absolutely one of the greatest. I did a book years ago about the blues and traveling Highway 61 and all of that. And so I did a reading. I was going to do a reading in Key West, and I chose for the venue B.O.'s Fish Wagon because my then, I guess he would be cousin-in-law,
Mhm.
Barry Cuda, played the piano there, and, as I was reading from the bluesier section of the book, he was improvising on the piano and was responding to everything I wrote with some new figure of music. That was fun, but, you know, I live on the water here, so I have no problem getting good seafood, but there's nothing quite like
Mhm.
seafood in Key West.
No, that's always my go-to is a fish sandwich and a cold beer, and I'm happy. I
Yeah.
I don't have to get totally dressed up. That's it. Anything else you want to let people know about you, the book, anything?
No, I just think, I hope people like it. I'm when I think about it, I get kinda sad because I'm thinking of all the people that I talked to and the wonderful time I had doing it and writing it. It was exhausting, but, you know, those people are gone, and I miss them. When I was in Montana, I rented this little cabin, and I would interview all day and then stay up all night writing, and I don't know how I lived because I do need my sleep. But you know, I'd open the door in the morning and there's a herd of buffalo, and I thought,
Hmm.
why am I here with these buffalo writing about an island paradise? And I think it kind of showed the expanse of Key West. Like Key West is a place, but it's also a state of mind.
Mhm.
And when people tell me that I went to Key West, and years later I found your book, and I felt like I was back there, and I thought, that's what I wanna hear. I wanna hear that you know, you understand the not only the great beauty, but the inspiration of the place and its significant role it's played in our cultural history and, you know, our history overall. I mean, there's so many stories. I felt like I had just barely scratched the surface with these.
Yeah.
So I hope other people will come along and keep up, the novels that Tom Corcoran unfortunately can no longer write, or can tell some of these stories. I think we're all missing Jimmy Buffett,
Mhm.
and you know, uh, rarely I think was an artist so well served by a muse because he went there and got the essence of Key West into a 3-minute song.
Yeah.
That's great talent.
And it still is timeless and means the same thing today. And so
Yeah,
it hasn't dated itself or anything.
yeah.
Nope.
And, you know, he's Thomas McGuane's brother-in-law, so there is a pretty tight circle of
Yeah.
characters in this book.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Well, this was an absolute pleasure, Bill. I love that mile marker zero gives us those wild stories and it's what we expect from Key West, especially when we visit often. But I think it gives us a lot more than that, though. And you touched on this. It gives us an insight into the creativity of people, their friendships, and some of the heartbreak, and how complicated all of that, mm, let's say, life can be. And it's still a place, though, that I think fascinates people today. And they pick up your book, and not much has really changed from your book to today when you go visit Key West, so you can still see the places and feel like you're walking the streets of the 70s because it looks a lot like it did. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. And if you have any further questions, let me know. Put them in the comments, DM. We'll get them answered. With that, you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Well, I have a massive thank you to William McKeen for stopping by and telling us all about mile marker zero. I don't know about you, but I suddenly have an overwhelming urge to quit reality, move to the Keys, and drink a frozen margarita at 11 a.m. But anyway, do yourself a favor and grab a copy of Mile Marker Zero. I dropped the link right in the show notes because you absolutely need these brilliant, chaotic stories in your life. It's like a time machine, minus, all the 70s fashion stuff. Until next time, stay salty and keep it weird.